What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to XJW Diaries. My name is Justin. So today I have another interview for you guys. This one is different than any other story I've heard before. This person left the Jehovah's Witnesses when they were only 15, 16 years old. And yet, the witnesses had a very, very big impact on their entire adult life. You know, when you don't get acceptance from people who are supposed to accept you, you go looking for acceptance in all the wrong places. When you don't get love in the proper way from people who are supposed to love you, you don't know how to love. And you go looking for love in all the wrong places. In Tim's story, you will see just that, and you will see the real impacts of the fake conditional love that the Jehovah's Witnesses give out, and how deeply that can impact a person and the major effects it can have on someone's life in various aspects. So it may be a long interview, but just like all of my interviews, you know, as much as possible, I want to let people speak, share their story from the bottom of their hearts, because somewhere out there is someone who can really relate to that. And, you know, I've seen with some of these longer interviews, there's people out there who, you know, may only watch for the first 30 minutes or so. But there's also a lot of people out there who watch the entire thing and watch it multiple times. So whether you stay for the whole thing or just for a short while, I really hope you guys enjoy this interview. This was a very, very big step for Tim in being truly authentic. He was really, really happy to do this. And Tim's birthday is coming up in just a few days, November 27th. So if you happen to see this video on that day, please wish Tim a happy birthday. But with all that said, here is Tim's story. All right, Tim. Well, thank you so much for coming on, being willing to tell your story. I know your story is going to be different than anything else we've had so far. So, but I want to just start with the usual place of asking how you got involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place.
I was born into it. 3 generations. Grandpas were elders. Great grandpas were elders. I never met the great grandparents. They had passed when I was born. But I mean, it's on my dad's side, it was multi-generational. On my mom's side, it was 1 generation. My mother's side of the family was more visual and there. And there wasn't any elders on that side. My dad's side of the family lived in a county away, so they went to different congregations, so I didn't see my grandfather as much. Now, my uncle became an elder, and he lived in our congregation, and he was actually... so before I was born, my aunt was actually... and I call him my uncle because by marriage, but he was actually, it was interracial marriage back in the early 70s, and they were married until he passed away. He excelled in the witnesses as a ministerial servant first and then an elder. My dad never made it past being a ministerial servant because of issues within our home. You know, home life was a little different, but as far as being in the religion, I didn't know anything different. So it seemed okay then. It just seemed normal.
Yeah. And I think that's how a lot of people are when they were born and raised into that religion. Is, you know, there's so many things that from the outside look strange, but when you're born and raised into it, like you said, that's your normal. So you don't know any different. Yeah, that's just this.
Yeah, I mean, we went out in service, and I gave talks, and you know, from an early age, you know, I was up giving talks, and it's crazy, you know, how much that benefited me later in life. But it was just how it was. Yeah. But honestly, as a child, I never really was into the religion too much. I was always bored at the Kingdom Hall. I hated it. I did what I had to do. But, you know, I was, you know, as an adult, I was diagnosed with ADHD in my 30s. So I obviously had that as a child. And so I had trouble. I was easily distracted. So that made a lot of trips to the bathroom. You know what I mean? at the Kingdom Hall. Tons of trips to the bathroom just to get up and do something. And back in my time, you know, when it was going on, I mean, ADHD wasn't really something they diagnosed you with anyway. So, you know, as we get on with the story, we'll see that after the event that got me shunned, my parents ended up putting me in 2 mental behavioral hospitals. And I don't know what I was diagnosed with then. I know it wasn't ADHD, but I was on Ritalin, so I'm sure it was some whatever they called it back then, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into that. So, what went on then later on in your childhood that would get you reproved as a child? And how old were you when this was going
on? I was 10. I was 10. What? It's crazy stupid. I was with my mom, and my mom was the disciplinarian of the family. She was very heavy into discipline, and it was borderline abusive. I mean, when I got spanked, it was coat hangers, vacuum cords. I think I'd mentioned that to you before. It was whatever she could get her hands on, and gritting her teeth when she's spanking me. Dad was very passive, and that was a lot of reason why he didn't excel in the congregation, because he wasn't the head of the household like he was supposed to be. But what happened was I was with my mom shopping, and we were at Kmart. I don't know if you know what Kmart stores are. It's kind of like a Walmart. They're gone now today, I think. But we were shopping, and while we were in the store, I had picked up a little digital stopwatch, and I had it in my hand. And honestly, I don't remember if it was intentional or not, you know, but we went through line. Mom paid for everything she had, and I ended up walking out to the store with this little watch in my hand. And she discovered it before we made it to the car. And, you know, she marched me right back into the store, made me give it back. And I got home and I got my butt whooped and grounded. And at that point, you know, I thought that was just the end of it. But she chose to share it with the congregation and with the elders. And that was it. It was that simple. And then I was in, you know, next thing you know, I'm in having a meeting with the 2 elders and me by myself. And I don't remember anything from that meeting. But the result is, you know, they publicly announced to the congregation what I did. And I was on public reproof, and I was not to be communicated with. And, you know, it was, from that moment on, everything changed. But before that, you know, I had all these friends in the congregation. We had sleepovers. We hung out. We did things, I mean, on the daily. I had, you know, people in our congregation that lived close by in the same neighborhood and neighborhoods and biking distance. So, I mean, I was hanging out with Jehovah's Witness kids on the daily. And, you know, after that, you know, at first, you know, I'm sitting there with my parents in the Kingdom Hall when they make the announcement, you know, and just feeling all eyes stare at me at once, you know, is how I remember it. And then having no one even look at me after that, you know, none of my friends, what I thought were my best friends, even made eye contact. I mean, and for me in my head, you know, that changed something for me. I got rebellious after that.
Yeah, I understand that. And let me just remind people, he was 10 years old during this time. I mean, we know how traumatizing it is to go through those announcements when you're, you know, in your late teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, the list goes on. But 10 years old, 10 years old for a stupid accident, basically. I mean, how many kids do that, you know, on a daily basis, you know, around the world on accident, you know, but then to be turned into the elders for it, I mean, wow. So where did things go from there?
That's where home life got a little crazy. You know, I have a hard time bringing up memories from my home life, and, you know, they come and go. Actually, I'm going to look at my notes here real quick. But so, you know, I did tell you my mom was, yeah. So in home life, so here's another part of the home life I wanted to go into is, you know, mom and dad, they had issues within themselves. Mom was very controlling. Dad was very super passive. He was not a father who was interactive or taught me anything about anything in life. He basically came home from work. He didn't work every day. Came home from work, sat on the couch and watched TV till he went to bed. Actually, I learned most of anything about anything, you know, like fishing and hobbies and stuff from my uncle who eventually became an elder. He was more a dad to me than my own dad. But home life did change quite a bit, and I got rebellious, and that's when my parents decided at 12 to put me in a behavioral hospital for children, and I was there for 6 weeks, I remember, or 6 or 8 weeks. So I was removed from school to go there, which that caused, you know, returning from that was just, and going back to school, school's a whole other story, and we can get into. And then a year later, they put me in another behavioral hospital. And I tried to actually, and since I've been an adult, try to reach out to those hospitals to get some records, but they only keep them for so long. I think they keep them for like 20 years, and it was past that threshold. So I don't know what I was diagnosed with back then, or I do remember being on Ritalin. I do remember going to see a therapist for a short time afterward, but things just continued to deteriorate at home. I mean, mom would, you know, if I was late, if I was outside playing or something, and you know, she had her boundaries of where I could go. And if I got caught past those boundaries, she'd come out looking for me and have a spatula in her hand and whoop my ass all the way home. And then there was multiple times, she would lock me out of the house. And, you know, one particular time I remember, I'm not sure how old I was. I was probably, I don't know, 14-ish. But, you know, she locked me out of the house, and it was storming that night, and I didn't have any friends other than, you know, I had some non-Jehovah's Witness acquaintances in the neighborhood, but mostly they bullied me and made fun of me. You know, they knew I'd been in the mental hospitals, and you know, I was a Jehovah's Witness, and they knew I was weird because of that. And, you know, I got diagnosed with autism in adult life, so there's that. So I've always been autistic. But this particular night, it was storming, it was raining, and I ended up going, and a girl in the neighborhood, I went and knocked on her window and seeing if there's, because her mom was cool. I remember her mom being really cool. And I had hung out there a couple of times and was asking her if there's any way she could talk to her mom and see if I could, you know, come in and crash on the couch. And she was afraid to get her mom up and do all that. So I actually ended up sleeping under her porch that night. So it's, you know, that I actually, you know, back in the day, I actually called social services on my parents a couple of times, and they never did anything. They investigated very shortly, I remember, but nothing ever came of it.
Jeez. Wow, that's a lot to deal with between 10 to 14 years old. I mean, and you know, as much as it sucks that social services didn't help you out, I mean, the Jehovah's Witnesses say that the congregation is supposed to rally around you and become your family and protect you.
And that was,
you know, yeah, and they did the opposite.
Total opposite. You know, because this happened at me at 10, by the age of, 14, 15, I'm already dealing with these inner feelings of not being liked, or being a wicked person or a bad person. And, I started to believe that a lot. And I had a tremendous fear of rejection. I was very socially awkward. Eventually, like, the neighborhood kids that I did kind of make friends with, at one point in time, every one of them I got into a fight with physically, and I was the one that would not fight back. I was I don't know. I was scared as a child. I was afraid, of getting beaten worse, because that's kind of the way it was at home with Mom, and her discipline. So I felt like if I just sit there and took it, it'd be over quicker. Sometime I remember one time this kid was beating me up, and I ended up cowered in a fetal position down on the ground, and another neighborhood kid actually come and stopped it.
Wow.
One point in time, a kid came, and one of the older kids in the neighborhood actually grabbed me and tied me to a chair in his yard. And I don't know how word got around, but my uncle, he wasn't an elder at the time or ministerial servant at the time, he came and rescued me. Wow. I've had the bullying that I went through was ridiculous. That same kid that tied me to the chair, and I need to be authentic for me and tell even the worst of the worst, because it needs to come out. But that same kid one time held me down and pissed in my face, and this is the kind of bullying that I dealt with just with the neighborhood. So I very much internally became, shut down. I've never in my life been able to really have real friendships or real relationships, anything that's long lasting. And also, when I was younger, I was also, I did outlandish things just to get attention, which would often get me in trouble. I ended up getting a lot of trouble in my teenage years. I actually got, at 16, I got arrested for the first time because I was locked out of my house. Mom had locked me out, and 16 is when I ended up, I believe it was 16 is when I ended up finally leaving home permanently. But I was locked out at 16, and I went to a neighbor in the neighborhood and knocked on his window and seen if he was up, and he was up. And, next thing you know, I talked him into, hey, let's take your mom's car out for a drive. And I didn't have a license either at 16. Mom didn't let me get my license until I turned 18. But we ended up pushing his mom's car out the driveway, and getting on it, going on a joyride. We were out for hours, and we took turns driving. And then finally, I was driving, and I got on the interstate, and I'll never forget this. I got on the interstate in Louisville. It was not the interstate; it was more like it was the interstate, but it was the loop around the city. I forget what they're called, but I got on the ramp and I punched it. And by the time I was on the interstate, I was doing 80, and just so happened there was a cop right there, and I get pulled over, and I'm scared to death. I was always tiny. I've always been a petite guy, and I always look really young for my age. But I remember the cop, he come up to the window, and he asked for my driver's license. And I'm like, I don't have one. And he asked me to step out of the car. And I came out of the car, and he had me at the back of the car, and he goes, never forget what he said to me. He goes, hey, your zipper's down. You been playing with your pecker? And I'm like, no. You know, he goes, has your friend been playing with your pecker? And I was like, no. But that cop arrested me, and I ended up going to in Louisville. It's a big city. They took me to the real jail, and I was in the real jail, the adult jail, for probably, God, at least 6 to 8 hours before they transferred me to a juvenile facility, and then the whole family came to pick me up, which I was shocked, but the whole family showed up to pick me up. And that was another thing, you know, this a weird dynamic in my family. You know, anytime I did get in trouble as a child, or anytime, it was always the whole family was involved. You know, there would be a family meeting and they would all come to the house and discuss, you know, me and my punishment. It was really, really kind of strange in hindsight.
Wow, yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. You can already see just how, you know, having that big rejection in your younger years has, you know, snowball effect as you get into your teen years.
I never got taken off public reproof.
That was my next question. Yeah. So
yeah, I never got taken off public reproof. So it was it was very humiliating and awkward. Just a terrible experience that time from 10 to, you know, 16, I guess, when I finally left home for good. You know, and there were some other things that were happening behind the scenes that my parents didn't know about. And there were some things that I even held in until I didn't tell anybody until my 30s. But there was a neighbor of my aunt, and it was an older man. He was a retired teacher, and he had a bunch of African cichlids, fish, a big fish tank of African cichlids. I don't know if you know what they are, but I had a love of animals when I was a kid, and all kinds. And I had a nice aquarium at home, and my aunt introduced me to him, and I would come over and he'd teach me about the fish and everything. And when he'd go out of town, he would get me to look after them. Well, eventually that guy exposed me to pornography and molested me on multiple occasions. And I didn't know anything about sex at all. That was, you know, as a Jehovah's Witness, I mean, that's, for me, and the way it was in my family, it wasn't even discussed. I didn't know anything about masturbation. I didn't know anything about anything. I mean, I was clueless. So that was but that wasn't the first, actually, that was the first experience, though, where I would consider I was molested. Also, when I was young, 5, 6 years old, there was a kid, and I remember he was a worldly kid, and I remember I wasn't I wasn't supposed to be associating with them, but you know, when I was out playing, sometimes, you know, I just do what I did, and I ended up hanging out with this kid, and I don't know what went on in his family, because he was probably only about 2 years older than me, if that. But he did things to me that would be considered rape. And I never told anybody about that. It was, I don't know, I always felt like I held things inside, especially stuff like the sexual stuff. I felt like if I told anybody, I'd get in trouble.
Yeah, and that. Unfortunately, that is a common thing with a lot of people that are in these type of religions, where they have these things happen to them, and they feel like they can't share because, you know, it's been built up so much that you're going to get into, you know, big trouble over it. You know.
Yeah. You know, my family gave me zero preparation for life. You know, there was, of course, higher education was discouraged. So, you know, I knew nothing about the world when I when I left home. So I left home just first I had the idea that I was a bad person already. So I was doing some shoplifting. I got in trouble. I got arrested multiple times. Nothing ever serious, but got into drugs and there was a lot of things that happened. At one point in time, and maybe we should get into this in a minute as we move further down, because I've got some stories that happened to me as I was in my from 16 to probably 25 that are just that'll blow you away, I believe.
Yeah, let's get into those.
At one point in time, and this is unusual for an elder, but at one point in time when Mom and Dad had kicked me out of the house, my grandpa agreed to take me in. And I don't think he told anybody that he did, because he didn't make me go to the meetings. I stayed with him for a few months in Shelbyville, Kentucky. And then while I was in Shelbyville, I met a lot of people, and with the way I felt within myself, I was drawn to people that were not the best influences. Let's just put it that way. So I got into doing some drugs and stuff while I was at my grandfather's house. At the time, just to be real, it was I got into smoking crack, and I eventually stole my grandfather's credit card, who was an elder, and and went out and spun a bunch of money on it to trade the stuff I bought to get drugs. A friend, actually, I was influenced to do this. I didn't decide to do this on my own. I was influenced to do this. And also in that same group of friends, Shelbyville was a very traumatic experience for me outside of Jehovah's Witness religion. It was because of the association I found myself within. The group of people I was with were doing a lot of drugs. They were rowdy. And I actually was at a party one night with these guys, kids. And I was probably, I don't know. I can't remember how old I was, but a fight broke out at the party between two guys, and the guy, one of the guys in the fight ended up leaving with him and his friend. But a few hours later, they came back and they did a drive-by, and it caught one guy in the forehead and killed him right in front of my face. And that was a big scene. The police, obviously were there, and that was a really traumatic experience at the time. My grandfather actually came and picked me up from the scene. But yeah, I don't, to this day, I don't understand why he did that as an elder. And, occasionally when I was with him, I did go to meetings. I remember, but he remained an elder. I don't know, but he was the big main elder of that congregation. What are they called now? I forget.
I think they're called the presiding overseer.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe just because of that, he got away with doing what he did. But that was something that was unusual in the story of Jehovah's Witnesses, because you usually don't see that. But after I stole his credit card and spent all that money, and then he found out about it, he did a really it was actually one of the best things he could have done for me. He turned me into the police, and I got arrested. I ended up doing 54 days in the county jail there, and at that time I felt like that maybe I should get back into the religion. And I had while I was in jail, my grandfather had another elder from the congregation come to the jail and have studies with me. And I was starting to feel like maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And, I can make my life right and get right with Jehovah and get right with the truth. But I ended up being there 54 days, and I got released early because they let me go into a rehab program for the drug addiction. And that happened to be counties away. And that was a 90-day program. And that's where things changed again, because while I was there, I successfully made it through the program, but I met a girl there, and we ended up impulsively, after both of us got out of that program, it was in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, impulsively got married after a month of knowing each other. And any ideas about going back to the Jehovah's Witness religion just went out the door at that point. And I never looked back from then.
Wow. Well, that's a pretty Jehovah's Witness-like thing to do, to get married after 1 month.
Yeah, we went to the courthouse and had it done. And then in like 8 months, we were divorced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I ended up staying in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and I met another girl. Actually, let me go back just a little bit, because the first girl that I was with there for 8 months before we divorced, she introduced me to the Grateful Dead, which I don't know if you're familiar with Grateful Dead or not, but that becomes a little important part of my life story a little later. But I'll get back to that. While I was in E-Town, in Elizabethtown, I ended up meeting another girl, and after a few months, we got married. And that lasted 3 years, and two children came out of that marriage. And so that's a story in its own. I couch surfed with the worldly friends that I had, but I never really truly had. I really, in my head too, I always felt like nobody liked me. I was the odd man out. So I was no matter what friend group I found myself in, or whose couch I was crashing on, or who I was staying with at the time, I always got picked on or whatever. I remember a funny story. This is when I very first left home, and I was staying with the friend Chris, and when his family learned I never experienced a Christmas, they decided to have me over at their grandmother's house for Christmas. And it was so funny. Her grandma got me a gift. And I was like, oh, I was so surprised to get a gift. It was a freaking bar of soap. Of all things. But that was my first experience with Christmas. And, even as an adult, with the ideology that's been just ingrained in my brain, I've never embraced holidays. It's caused problems in my relationships, as I could give two shits about holidays. I really, even to this day. Matter of fact, a lot of holidays I just spend by myself. Most holidays I spend by myself. It's just another day to me. But as far as things I got myself into, I always was attracted the kind of people to me that were not good influences ever. And that's just where I found myself around. Eventually, I'd found myself meeting some people in a neighborhood, and they were in a gang, and it was called PED, which I don't even remember what it stood for. But I started hanging out with these guys, and I was going to get, you know, I hung out and I stayed with them for a while. And we did some crazy stuff. We'd go out and steal things, break into cars, you know. We do. I mean, I remember driving through neighborhoods with a BB gun, shooting people's windows out from the car multiple times. Just crazy stuff. But a lot of thieving, a lot of stealing things. There was a lot of alcohol use too. You know, I didn't actually do any kind of drugs or drinking until I was 18. But the alcohol was kind of a constant for a while. And weed was always there. But I got in with these guys, and I decided that yeah, I want to join up with you guys, you know. And that the way it worked out is you got beat into the gang, right? And they were trying to decide who they were going to have me fight, which of course this terrified me because I never fought back. But somehow I was going to prove myself, you know. I didn't know how that was going to turn out. Fortunately, it never got to that point. At the guy's house I was staying at, his name was, he went by Kilo. And he was this really big, huge, like muscular black guy. And he was really amazing at cutting hair and doing like crazy designs in your head and stuff. And but he, the leader of this so-called gang was Dan, and they called him Dan the Man. And oh yeah, and he was coming. Dan the Man was coming over to the apartment that night, and they had gave me a my gang name, and because I drove, my first car was a 1969 Volkswagen Bug, you know, a Beetle. So they gave me the name Beto. And that night, before Dan had got there, part of the initiation process was to get that get your gang name carved into your arm, you know, with a knife, so you had a scar that said it. And that's what the plan was that night. I was going to get that done, and that involved me drinking a lot of vodka. Well, they did it, and I had the scar for a long time. You can't see it anymore. But apparently, I blacked out drunk on the vodka before Dan the Man got there. And from the stories I hear, and I don't know what's true or not, but I, in my drunken state, called Dan the Man's girlfriend a bitch. And the next memory I actually have is I woke up in a closet, and I had a vague memory of getting beaten, like just not a like solid memory of it, but a vague memory of it. And I come out of the closet, and I go, everybody is still asleep. Everybody's sleeping. And I go to use the bathroom, and I'm beat the hell up. And they shaved my eyebrows and shaved my head. And I ended up walking away from, I left that apartment and never came back, and went on to my next journey. And I ended up getting caught up with some people from high school. And how I did that, because I ended up getting a job working at a gas station, and just so happened the old lady there that worked there, her son was one of the popular kids in high school, which that, after knowing him, I mean, he was just a bully. But it got me right back into drugs. So, well, this was before the I'm getting my times mixed up because this was before I went to my grandpa's and all that. But yeah, I got into some drugs there. I got fired from that job. I got fired from that job for drinking in the beer cooler. But then I ended up staying with a guy that was a friend of a friend, and I got introduced to him, and he knew I didn't have a place to stay, so he let me come and stay at his place. And he had he raced cars. There was a speedway that was not too far from us where you could go. It was a drag strip, and you could go bring your own car and race all night. So he was into that and building those cars and everything, and he would spend hours just tweaking and working on the engine and everything. And I figured out why he spent hours is because he was doing what we called back then crank, which is meth, and turned me on to that. I was next thing you know, I'm doing that, staying up all night, and it ended up I ended up getting kicked out of his house, which is a good thing. And it's weird, none of these those kind of drugs that I did in my early years never stuck with me in life. I didn't continue that behavior unless I was around those people. And especially after the rehab that I went to, that I told you about earlier. Now that I did drink after that, and drinking continued to be a part of my life, and so did alcohol. And I have to get into the Grateful Dead experience too, because that's kind of who shaped who I thought I was for a long, long, long time. But getting back to that guy that raced cars, I'm a lonely kid. I'm still this lonely kid lost in the world. This ex-Jehovah's Witness has no idea, what's going on. So back then they had these phone lines that you could call. They were 976 numbers back then, and you could call them, and they had all kinds of different lines you could call. You could call for astrology. You could call and get a psychic reading. You could call and talk to girls or whatever, and they charged your phone by the minute. Well, yeah, while I was staying at this guy's house, I ended up getting on the phone and getting a psychic reading. So, because I was like, what the hell, and they're really good at keeping you on the phone. I ended up being on the phone for like 4 hours during the night, and this guy didn't have any idea about it until he got his phone bill, and it was like a $900 and something on that one phone call. And I got kicked out of the house, obviously, for that, which that ended up being a good thing. But, as things moved on, I just found myself in other places that were bad environments. I want to go back to Elizabethtown, to when I got married the second time, because it kind of all ties into where where this goes. When I married the second girl, and I had 2 children with her, I ended up, I think I need to get into part of the Grateful Dead where this influenced me. I met, while I was married to her, or no, the first girl introduced me to the Grateful Dead, the one I was with 8 months. And while I was married to the girl for 3 years, we did a lot of Grateful, we went and seen a lot of Grateful Dead related events, concerts, and everything. And that was when I was the friend that had exposed me to that and took me to my first concert or show. That was one of the very first times that I ever felt a sort of an acceptance in my life. Everybody there was friendly and accepting and welcoming, and I gravitated to that hippie lifestyle. I mean, till this day, I consider myself to be a hippie. I still love the Grateful Dead and their music, but that subculture was my first bit of acceptance, and kind of for a few years became like what my family, and that's where I really kind of started to learn how to make friends, but I just never kept any long-term friends. You know, I didn't know how to maintain those relationships. To this day, I don't know how to maintain those relationships. And that's what I'm working on with doing this kind of stuff and, you know, therapy. You know, as an adult, I mean, I have absolutely at right now at this stage of my life, I'll be 51 in just a few days on the 27th. I have one friend, and I've only known him for a few years, and he lives a little ways away, but you know, he lives about an hour away. But you know, we talk on the phone and stuff, but my sister lives in Florida. She's not a Jehovah's Witness. She's 7 years younger than me, and we are two different people. You know, she's real high strung, and I'm real laid back. The Grateful Dead experience also got me into some spiritual teachings, esoteric teachings that I gravitated towards, and kind of I still have those ideas alive and beliefs in my life. But the girl with that being said, me and the one I had two kids with, we ended up moving back to Louisville, Kentucky, from E-Town. And while we were there was a lot of craziness that happened that, I mean, I was just, I didn't care because I had never been treated with any kind of unconditional love. All the love I ever gotten was conditional. And so that I didn't really know how to treat people. So I didn't really give a shit about most anything. So I did some crazy stuff that, you know, in hindsight is pretty terrible. Like while I was married to this girl, you know, I got paid from a job I was doing, and I took off to Myrtle Beach with two girls and another guy and spent my entire check and didn't even tell my wife. and just showed up back at home 3 days later, which then she ended up, you know, that just snowballed into her having an affair, and then we end up divorcing from there. And then let's see. Let me look at my notes here and see where we're at. Do you have anything you want to ask right now?
No, it's a whirlwind that you've been through. I mean,
it's been a whirlwind. Let's see.
And you can just see like everything that you're bringing up. You know, you can see where you were looking for acceptance that you should have gotten when you were a child. But yeah, you know, you can see the effects of that. You know, getting reproved at such a young age, and how that's, you know, that just grows and grows. You know.
Yeah. So okay. Oh yeah. So this is where this ties in. We moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and the apartment building we were staying in. I ended up meeting some people there, and I met this guy named Randy, and that's the next after me and it was funny actually. I was not a good employee at any job I ever had. I can count on both hands how many jobs I've actually had in my life, and I've gotten fired from every one of them. And that's probably due to my autism and ADHD. But so that made supporting a family very rough. We got kicked out of our apartment before we were divorced, and I ended up, and at that point we split up. She went back to E-Town with the kids, and I met a guy named Randy who I was staying with, and Randy, he was something. He ended up dying of a drug overdose at 21. And after he passed away, I had met Randy's older brother, Chris, and Chris took me in. And Chris was probably, I don't know, he's probably about five to 10, 5 to 10 years older than me. I don't really remember. But Chris was a character too. He had his job was he worked for a company that cleaned carpets for apartment complexes. Like, you know, when somebody moved out, he'd come in and clean the apartment, do the floors, or he would do clean occupied apartments, shampoo the floors if it was requested. And so he got me a job working with him, and he when we were in occupied homes, most of the times the residents weren't there. So he was a thief. He was going through their stuff. He was going through their pill bottles. And this is where I first got introduced to benzos, which is like Xanax and Valium and Klonopin, which actually Klonopin is what I'm prescribed today. But he would steal pills and steal things from people's houses. And I had never done it, taken anything from somebody's home while I was with him. But one day while we were working, we left this building. We left this. It was one of these kind of apartment buildings where all the entryways are inside in like a hallway. And this apartment we had just got done doing the floors in, it looked like a brand new pair of New Balance tennis shoes just were sitting on the welcome mat out there. And as we were walking out to the truck, and I was like, man, that was a nice pair of shoes. And Chris was like, well, go get them. And I was like, man, I don't know. He said, go get them shoes if you want them shoes. So I went out and stole the shoes. You want to hear some real karma story about that? I caught athlete's foot from those shoes. The only time I've ever had it in my entire life. But I stayed with Chris for a good while, and this guy was a thief. He stole a car. He stole a car, and he needed parts for his car. So while he was in an apartment, he would keep an eye out for the exact same car he had, and he found one. And while we were cleaning an apartment, he stole the keys to the car and came back later and stole it. And I don't know if he ever got caught. He kept it. He lived far away from where he took it. He had it at his house underneath the tarp and was taking parts from it. But I eventually got kicked out of his place because he thought I was flirting with his girlfriend. So from then, gosh, I gotta figure out what happened there, because we're getting almost to the point. Oh, I went back to staying with that guy, Chris. Chris and there was actually another guy, Gary, were friends. It was back and forth between Chris and Gary's house. And I ended up getting my first job doing sales. And it turned out that I was natural, thanks to door-to-door work. But I got my first sales job was working for a company that basically went out on the streets with random items that they would have in their warehouse, and we would just walk into businesses, or sometimes it'd be door-to-door and cold call and sell these things. And then I was actually able to buy get enough money to where I was able to put a little down payment on a mobile home, a trailer, in a trailer park. And I grew up in a trailer park. My mom and dad lived in a trailer park. They lived in a trailer to they died. They were, mom, it was interesting. Mom was a penny pincher and just, she's Jehovah's Witness, she didn't spend money on a lot of, I don't know, at least in my family, she didn't spend a lot of money on anything. But I lost my train of thought. Where was I?
Talking about growing up in the trailer and.
Oh yeah. I'd made enough money to get a a trailer of my own, and it was in the trailer park that Mom and Dad lived in. And it was actually kind of crazy. The whole mom side of the family lived in that trailer park. It was a big trailer park, probably 400 or 500 trailers. While I was in the trailer park, I changed jobs. I ended up working for Dish Network, selling satellite TV. And I was so good at that they ended up putting me on a special plan, and I ended up making a good amount of money working for them. I even went to New Orleans with them and stayed in New Orleans 2 months down there, where a cable company had went out of business and they were switching everybody over to Dish Network. And but because of I just didn't know how to manage life. So I didn't know how to pay my bills. I spent my money irresponsibly, and I ended up losing the trailer. And you know, things just unfold how they unfold, and every I don't know, for me, just one thing kind of led to another. In the process of me losing the trailer, I found another job that was a traveling sales position for a company that sold this all-purpose cleaner. I don't know if you ever heard about these people or not. Have you ever seen them, the all-purpose cleaner guys?
No.
Okay. Well, I don't even know if this was in right around 2000. So I got this job, and it turned out to be really kind of a scam job. This company was called what were they called? Crown Super Cleaner. And what it was is they had their gig was they had this all-purpose cleaner that was it was a concentrate. So, and you could use it on anything. It was supposed to be biodegradable and non-toxic. And you could take an ounce of it and put it in a bottle and make a 32-ounce bottle of cleaner. So one 32-ounce bottle of this would make 32 bottles of all-purpose cleaner. So, you know, that was the deal of how you sold money on it, or how you made money on it. Except this company had basically, they had probably, I don't know, there was over 100 people working for them. So, and they were all pretty much street kids who had nowhere else to go, if you know what I mean. And we would go from city to city and stay a week at a time. We'd go to a city, and the company would get the hotel rooms for everybody. We'd basically, this company was so big, we basically take over the whole hotel. And we would stay in that city for a week, do our thing, and then drive 3-4 hours away to the next city, do our thing, and hop across the country doing that. I ended up going to 37 states doing that. And the thing was, though, is they were ripping the kids off. I mean, the only thing you were really getting is a solid place to stay. But I had turned out to be really, really good at it. I was a so-called manager. But even a manager, I was literally getting my room paid for and about $50 a day. And I mean, maybe, but it wasn't nothing really. I had gotten really good at doing that, though. I could go out. I went from selling just bottles of cleaner to selling cases of cleaner. I got to where I was instead of going door to door at houses, I was going door to door to businesses, walking in off the streets and selling a dealership 15 cases of the shit, you know, like a car dealership. So after I figured out, you know, how we were being taken advantage of, I realized I heard through the grapevine, you know, there was other companies out there that paid, that treated you properly. And I ended up finding another company I went to work for, and it was Done Easy was the name of the company. It was Fresh Start 2000 was the name of their cleaner. And they had a good little, they were small. It was an older guy who ran the company and only had like 15 or so people working for him, and they were all good at what they did. And he split the commission 50-50. So, I mean, like, there was days, you know, back then that I was pulling in $300-400 a day on the split, which was freaking awesome. I mean, he provided vehicles and let us buy them from him on time if we wanted to, and I ended up doing that. But then we ended up stopping in the town of Galax, West Virginia, and in Galax, West Virginia, met a girl. And the girl also had a sister. So this other guy that was on the sales team with me, we called him Slim, because he looked like Slim Shady back in the day. He hooked up with the girl's sister, so we decided we were going to stay, and we left the business, and ended up staying in Galax, Virginia, with that girl, and they lived together, and we ended up staying at their house and was there for a few months. And then she was starting to complain about me not having a job, because now I had no source of income. So I said, hey, you want to get on the road and do some cleaning? You know, I was just telling her about the cleaner business, and she knew about it and how I got there. And it intrigued her, but the company wouldn't take me back that I worked for. So I reached out to another company that did it. This was, I think it was called Eliminator. There was a bunch of these companies back in the late 90s and early 2000s that did the exact same thing. So I ended up getting up with them. And at the time they were in Texas, and they sent us, if you were good at what you did, and this cleaner and companies, they knew about each other. And so if they knew you were good, they would get you there. So she decided to come with me, and they get both of us a bus ticket from Galax, Virginia, to God, did we go to, where did we go in Texas? We went somewhere. It wasn't Dallas. I can't remember, but it was somewhere in Texas. And, and I come in there all Mr. High and Mighty, like I was with this huge ego, because I was really good at what I did and knew I was good at what I did. Well, that company didn't take too well with that ego, and they left us in Texas, me and the girl. So we ended up having to get a we went to some place that helped people out, and they ended up getting us bus tickets back. And I didn't want to go back to Galax, and she didn't want to go where I wanted to go. So we split ways from there. I ended up going back to Kentucky, and let's see, who did I go? Oh, I was able to go back and stay with Chris, the dude that kicked me out. That was the thief. And I don't know really how that happened. I don't remember how that all worked out, but I ended up being able to stay with him again. And I got a job I ended up getting a job doing telemarketing for this company called, what do they call it? Dial America. And what their deal was, it was a sales floor, about 100 people on the sales floor. And that is, they sold magazine subscriptions over the phone. But the department I was in, we only called customers that bought from us previously, and we donated a portion of the proceeds to a charity of their choice. So before the phone call was made on the screen, we knew what charity they had donated to before, what magazines they bought. So, the phone call was something like, hey, this is Tim from Dial America and the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It's that time of year again, blah, 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 and go into my spiel to sell my magazines. And I, you only worked 4-hour shifts there. They only had 20-hour work weeks there. There was about 100 people on the sales floor, and I was in the top 3 every night. And I was pulling about $700 to $800 a week in those 20-hour shifts. And that's where I met my a girl. I always meet a girl. I met a girl. Her name was Jasmine, and we ended up getting an apartment together after it was all said and done. And then I got fired from the Dollar of America because my ego, because I was always in the top 3. My aggressive ego just said the wrong things to the supervisors, and I thought I was, you know, invincible, untouchable. They wouldn't fire me. I make you too much money. But no, they made an example. So, but it did manage to save quite a bit of money. And Jasmine and I, we ended up being together for 8 years. This is the point in time. This is in 2001. I was living in an apartment together called Contiki Apartments in Louisville. And, you know, I still didn't have a circle of friends. I mean, my friends were a guy that worked at Dollar America and Jasmine, you know, and whoever she knew. But you know, I didn't have family I could go to. And mom and dad were never there to help. There was never a person to call when I got in trouble or got arrested for something stupid. So we decided, I had made the, I don't know how it came up, but Jasmine and I decided to move to the beach. And we did. And for me, it was, I think in hindsight, it was more about getting away from my family and just getting away from that environment that was just nothing but trauma for me in every step of the way. And I finally found a way where I could make money. My ego was off the hook at the time, but I knew I had an ability that I could use to make money. And Jasmine and I, Jasmine and I actually, so this is what we did. We ended up getting a private label before we moved to Myrtle Beach. We ended up, I found a company that would private label an all-purpose cleaner, and we did our own cleaner business for a while. That's what we did after I got fired from Dollar of America. I taught her how to sell cleaner, and we went out and did that. And the markup was absolutely crazy. I bought the stuff by the case, and it was private label with our name on it. We called it Jewel Bright. And 12 bottles, 12 32-ounce bottles come in a case. I paid $12 a case. We sold these cases for no less than $100. And we sold, after I taught Jasmine how to sell it, she was better than me. Both of us could go out and drop 10 to 15 cases a day. And we jumped across just a few states here and there until we made enough money. And that's where we decided to actually move to the beach. And we moved to Myrtle Beach in 2001. And I may have, you know, some of my time frames may be off of memory, but it is generally the order things went. So in 2001, we moved to Myrtle Beach, and which was pretty. It was a great experience. Not only, you know, I didn't see the beach for the first time until I was about. I seen it as a child. We went as a group, the Jehovah's Witness group, to Myrtle Beach. And that's why I chose Myrtle Beach as the place to go to, because I'd been there before, but, and I'd loved the ocean. So we moved to Myrtle Beach and got us a hotel room. We decided we were not going to do the cleaner thing because we didn't want to do all the travel. And it almost immediately got jobs in a telemarketing office there that sold timeshares. And of course, I was really good at it. And within the first week of being there, the owners of the office, it was privately owned. They had another office in Wilmington, North Carolina, that needed a manager, and offered me the management position with $1,000 a week salary plus commission on top of the office sales. And for me at the time, that was a lot of money. So for like the first month, we drove back and forth from Wilmington to Myrtle Beach. Was about an hour and a half drive. So we decided, Jasmine and I decided that we were going to go, we were going to move closer. And we just took a drive down the coast, and we ended up in a town called Southport, North Carolina. And we found a ferry that crossed the water there. And we didn't even know where the ferry went. We were just following the coastline, and we knew it just went to the next part of the coast. So we got on the ferry. It's a ferry that, you know, vehicles go on. It holds like 60 cars. And we got on that, and that took us to this barrier island. They call it Pleasure Island, but there's three beach towns there. There's Fort Fisher, Curry Beach, and Carolina Beach on this island. The island's about 8 miles long and about 1.5 miles wide at its widest point. And there's only 2 ways to get on it. There's a bridge at one end, and there's the ferry at the other. And we drove through that little town and kind of fell in love with Carolina Beach. And that's where we settled at. And I ended up living there for 20 years. But the job at the sales office that I was managing, I ended up getting fired from that. So when I started just trying to make a little money here and there. I'd take a little electrical work because I knew, you know, I knew a little bit about electricity, not just enough to get myself in trouble at the time, you know, from what my grandpa had taught me. And Jasmine and I, in Carolina Beach, got to realize Carolina Beach is a tourist town. That's all it is a tourist attraction town, and most of the revenue comes from the tourists. So it's very seasonal. And Jasmine got a job as a server, and a bartender. And matter of fact, she still lives in Carolina Beach to this day, and is still in the service industry, even though she has a degree in psychology, because she makes so much money in the service industry down there that it's ridiculous not to. I mean, she comes home with $400 or $500 a night in tips during the season, you know. But she had gotten a job. That's what she started doing while we were down there, and this is let me take a pause for a second. I got to use the bathroom actually, and come back because
you're good.
So yeah, Carolina Beach, ended up living there for 20 years, and Jasmine and I got married. We had a child and a daughter, and she's 17 now, senior in high school. But so when living in Carolina Beach was really interesting because it was this tourist town. So there wasn't a whole lot to do except go to bars. There's a lot of bars. There's a boardwalk there, a lot of bars, and, you know, entertainment kind of stuff like that. So we spent a lot of time drinking and made a lot of friends. And what I thought was of as friends in my brain. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had friends. I felt like I was actually, this was kind of a good stage for a while. But then Jasmine and I got into a scene that we didn't realize we would end up finding ourselves in. Apparently in Carolina Beach, there's a large population of swingers. And we ended up getting into that scene, and would have other women in our sexual relationship. And it was okay. We would, if everything was okay, we both agreed with it. It was kind of okay. You know what I mean? Long story short on that one, that stuff never works out. I would never, ever, ever do that again in a relationship. It ended up with both of us not paying attention to the rules, basically. But I did some cheating on her, and she did some cheating on me, except she got caught. And when she got caught, my little girl was 2 years old, and that's when we divorced, and that's when we split up. And for a moment, we had been in Carolina Beach for, I don't know, gosh, we'd been in Carolina Beach for years. We were together for 8 years, and I guess we were in Carolina Beach for about 7 years at that point. So we decided to have a child. Now we actually, she was planned. So once we split up and we were trying to figure out how we were going to handle that and what we were going to do, the idea came that, hey, well, maybe we should just go back to Kentucky. And she was from Southern Indiana. Her parents were there, and I mean, I was familiar with it. After the breakup, the friends kind of kept their distance, and I always felt awkward after I never felt comfortable by myself in social environments. So if I was by myself, I wouldn't go anywhere. So I guess I had a lot of codependency issues because of growing up a Jehovah's Witness. So having Jasmine with me wherever I went was great, because it gave me the ability to be social. So we did have the bright idea. I had the bright idea. Let's move back. And I moved back. We moved back to Kentucky. She moved back to her parents' house. I had actually made some money in the stock market in the meantime, and I used that money I had enough money to live on for about six to 8 months. And I went up there. My beer's crazy. I went up there I went to Kentucky, and I rented a house because my sister still lived there. And that was one of the main reasons. Is my sister, and she was never a Jehovah's Witness from childhood either. She went through a lot. She was treated way differently than me growing up. Man, I didn't even go into that, but there was some crazy stuff that my mom and dad let happen with my sister. But she ended up running away from home at one point, and she was put in a facility, and then she never went back to being a Jehovah's Witness. So that was one of the things I wanted to move back to Louisville for, because my sister was there. Well, I got up there, I rented a house, and first things, the Jehovah's Witnesses are moms trying to get me back to the Kingdom Hall, and they're having them come by and visit. And, I didn't want no part of that. I didn't have my parents didn't do anything for me. I mean, I talked to them probably twice a year on the telephone, and the conversations, Dad hardly ever talked on the phone until later in the years. But Mom, I mean, the conversations were always the same. I mean, she talked to me like I was a little child, so we rarely talked. There was, so that I didn't have any interest in that. And I did have an interest in getting back with Jasmine. I really wanted, I was heartbroken. And I thought if we got away from Carolina Beach that we would get up there, and, she'd live with her parents, and we'd eventually work things out. But that's not how it happened. She ended up, hooking up with other guys. And after I found out, she was doing that, I decided that I wanted to move back to Carolina Beach. And I did. I packed up, and I I flew a buddy of mine from Carolina Beach up to Kentucky to help me pack all my stuff and drive back home, because I had a work van and a car at the time, and I had to pull the car. No, he drove the car. And I pulled a trailer with all my stuff back in it, and came back to Carolina Beach. And in Carolina Beach, I actually I'm trying to get my timelines right. But I ended up, where did I stay when I first got back there? I can't remember where I stayed. I rented a place. I remember what it was. So I was going to get to this part, but I ended up getting, when I got back, there was this brand new gated apartment condominium units that were just finished being built. And I was able to get a job doing maintenance there and got a free apartment out of it. And it was a luxury apartment. I had every apartment had a private elevator from the garage to the kitchen. And the building was like 5 stories. My unit, counting my garage, was 3 stories. And I stayed there, but I just didn't enjoy what I was doing. I didn't enjoy it at all. And I ended up getting fired, but I could stay there as long as I paid rent. And I did. I ended up creating my own job. I started a little newspaper. And it was called the Beach Buzz, is what I called it. And all it was is a little 1-page paper that had 30 spots of advertising on both sides of it, or 15 on this side, 15 on the back side. It folded it in half. It had what was going on, what bars had music. It had some puzzles, just silly. Have you ever seen the Coffee News or anything like that?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's where I had gotten my idea from. So I did it. I did it all. I figured it out all by myself, and I designed the paper. I got the printing equipment to print the paper. I sewed the ads for the paper. I designed the ads for the paper. I distributed the paper. I mean, I was a one-man show. I ended up having that for that I ended up getting somebody to help me a few years into it. I ended up selling out to him like 5 years into it. I bought it back from him and had it for an additional 2 years. But I had also had a coffee shop when Jasmine and I were together on the beach. We opened a coffee shop too together, just in hindsight. But gosh, I lost my train of thought again. I shouldn't have jumped. What was I talking about?
Talking about the paper.
Oh yeah, the paper. So while I had that paper, I met another girl, and this girl's name was Priscilla, and Priscilla was a yoga teacher, and we ended up getting together, and she moved in with me, and I had started to do electrical work at this point. This was I met her prior to buying the Beach Buzz back, actually. So I was doing electrical work, and we got a house together. We were together for about 1.5 years total. We got a house together, and she was immediately pregnant. So that's child number 4. And I ended up getting fired from the electrical job. And that's when I bought Beach Buzz back. And Priscilla helped me run that until we split up. And she was from California. And that's a whole story in itself. But she ended up taking my kid. He was 8 months old at the time, and left and went to California. And I pretty much have zero contact with them since they've been gone. And that's another thing, I have, because of the way I was brought up with no kind of love, no kind of direction. I don't have relationships with any of my children but my daughter. I mean, I do have a relationship with my oldest son, but it's very, very distant. His younger brother won't have nothing to do with me. The kid in California, you know, I've actually talked to him on the phone once a few months ago for the very first time because my daughter keeps up with him and made that happen. But it's I have such a difficult time with love, and I don't know how to do it really. So anyway, with Priscilla ended up leaving. I bought the Beach Buzz. When she left, I still had the Beach Buzz. So I was running that, and then I ended up having this younger guy helping me. He was great at sales, but he didn't have his driver's license, and he just wasn't very reliable. And I was just getting tired of doing it. It was a lot of work to do on your own. It was wearing me out. And I decided I wanted to go back to electrical work. So I went back, and I actually got a little serious, and I worked for a company for 2 years, and everything came back to me, you know, electrically, my knowledge. And in the meantime, I met a girl, and this girl was also a yoga teacher. Her name was Beth, and she was a very awesome person. I mean, to this day, out of all the relationships I've been in, I can say I probably love more than any of them, although the relationship was toxic. She suffered herself from PTSD. This is before I even knew I had any of this things autism, anything else. She had PTSD. She had been almost beat to death by a guy, and he was in prison. And she had a lot of stuff had happened to her. Actually, she had complex PTSD. So, and she was bipolar. So, and that caused issues in our relationship. But we were on and off for about 5 years, and I learned a ton of stuff from her. You know, she just really taught me a lot about just life, and she was very spiritual, and taught me a lot about spirituality and yoga, and just very cool spirit. But she had her demons, and her demons are what eventually, and me. I mean, I'm not putting all the blame on her. I definitely had some calls in the split up, but it was we split up multiple times, but finally just called it quits after 5 years of off and on. And at that point, when we had called it quits, she had actually, I wanted to take my electrical test to get my license, my contractor's license, because I hated working for people. I couldn't stand it. I was going to get fired eventually. I mean, it's just the way it was. I mean, I couldn't. I had a problem with people telling me what to do, especially when I felt like I knew more than they did. And I had an ego problem for a long time. So what this girl did, and this is the most important thing is somebody's ever done for me in my life. I was petrified for signing up to take that test for fear of failing. 95% failure rate first time you take the test anyway. She went and signed me up and scheduled it for me. I come home from work one day and said, "Hey, guess what? You're taking that test," you know, like whenever it was, like next week. I'm like, "Oh, what?" So I went and took the test, and I did fail it the first time. But I didn't fail it bad. And I was able to retest in 1 month. And I went back and passed the second time. So I have my contractor's license now. Now I could really make some money with electrical work. So I went and Beth, at the time, I got a few jobs there in Carolina Beach, and was making some good money, and had one or two guys helping me at a time. But Beth, where she got attacked by that guy was in Carolina Beach, and she was ready to just shake her feet at Carolina Beach and move off the beach. So I was like, okay, that's cool. What do you want to do? So we ended up renting a house out in this place called Rocky Point, and it's about 45 minutes. It was about an hour from Carolina Beach, out in kind of rural North Carolina, set near the river. And it was a nice house, set on 5 acres, had a private pond. I mean, it was beautiful. But within we moved in on July 1st, and we split up for the last time before July ended. So I ended up in that house by myself, and ended up letting a guy that worked for me move in with me and him and his girlfriend, who was older than me. And then in September, Hurricane Florence happened. I don't know if you know about Hurricane Florence, but Hurricane Florence was a category. It was a terrible storm. It was a Category 4, predicted to make landfall around Carolina Beach, and they were predicting a 20-foot storm surge. And here's some funniness out of this story. My ex-wife, we remained friends. Jasmine and I actually became friends after the divorce, after a period of time. She was petrified she was going to lose all of her things on the beach, that her house was going to get flooded. So she packed all of her things up and came out to my house, which was an hour from the coast, and moved all her stuff to my place. Now, the hurricane ended up slowing down in speed, and it was basically, it was going 3 miles an hour when it made landfall, but it weakened to a Category 1. But it sat on top of us for 4 days. We got 60 inches of rain. My house had about 6 feet of water on the first floor. We ended up getting rescued by the Cajun Navy. I couldn't even drive to my house for 15 days. I lived close to a river, and the rivers just took over everything. I ended up going out to, I had a friend in Carolina Beach that had a boat, and it was a flat bottom boat, and we went out there, and it was a 12-hour journey. We took a bunch of supplies for people that stayed there, and went to my house. Everything. I lost everything except what was on the second floor. And what was on the second floor wasn't much, because it was just 2 bedrooms, my daughter's bedroom and my bedroom. So lost everything. Ended up, long story short, got rescued by the Cajun Navy. My vehicle, I kept moving to higher ground, so my vehicle was good. People that were staying with me ended up... One of the persons was a neighbor, ended up passing away because he tried to drive away during the storm, and got swept away in his car. The guys that worked, the couple that worked for me, ended up getting taken to a shelter. But because I had my vehicle, I was like, I'm gonna try to drive. And I don't know how I managed to do it. GPS wasn't working, and I drove through some water I shouldn't have. I did have a 4-wheel drive, but I made it back to Carolina Beach. Carolina Beach had 0 flooding. And on the beach, when there's a hurricane, it's a storm surge. It comes in and goes out. I was experiencing inland flooding from the rivers. It stays for a while. So I ended up staying at the ex's place because my house was destroyed. And within a couple of days, just so much work started coming in. I didn't even have tools though. And out of nowhere, another electrician said, "Hey man, I got extra tools if you want to use them." And I'm like, heck yeah. So literally the first 5 days, I made 10 grand doing hurricane work. It was like the Wild West. I mean, and my company grew in just a few months, and went from me and a guy or 2 whenever I needed them to 7 or 8 guys at a time. And we had 3 vans on the road. And I had that for a couple of years, and I bought a Corvette. So here's the thing. Even though I had all that stuff, I ended up buying a motorhome to stay in. So I wasn't staying at my ex-wife's house. I'm trying to rush now because I know we're running out of time. But I ended up buying a motorhome, 31-foot Class A, you know, one that looks like a bus that you drive, and to live in until the house got fixed. And long story short on that, I decided to live in it full time, and I did that. I embraced that lifestyle for 5 years, while running the electrical business up until 2020. And the man, you might want to do this in a couple parts, because I haven't got to my parents dying yet. But I, you know, even though I had this business and I was making all this money, all these businesses and all these things I was doing, I was flying by the seat of my pants, because I had no, I had no idea how to do any of this business end of it. So I just made it up as I went. Long story short, on the electrical deal, I ended up, I did really good work, and I never had any complaints until I had employees. And I ended up getting a complaint, and they, me being like, I just don't, if there's trouble, I just kind of run from it. I didn't respond to the board, the electrical board. I just dismissed it. I just like pretended it wasn't there, just pretended it'd go away. And it didn't. I ended up losing my electrical license over that. But I had managed to save a good amount of money. I mean, like it was about $500,000. And that was right at the, I lost the license right at the beginning of 2020, and Dad had died at the end of 2019. So I wasn't too stressed about money, or working. I didn't really care about losing the license. I actually let a guy, one of my guys that worked for me, ended up getting his license and taking over the company. Didn't know what I was going to do, so I did a lot of traveling. But then the pandemic struck, actually, and I ended up, that one friend that I said I have, I ended up parking my motorhome in his yard. And when Dad died, that was in 2019, and very quick and unexpected. He got diagnosed with cancer, and actually, this is the way it happened with both of my parents. They got diagnosed with cancer and was dead within a few weeks. I mean, it was crazy. I got a phone call. I'd gotten a phone call. This is before the quarantine of the pandemic. It's in 2019. I got a phone call saying Dad wasn't doing good. You should schedule some time to come up here. And I was like, okay. That was, you know, Mom calling. And then same day, I got a phone call, and or maybe the next day, and says, you need to probably get here a little sooner. And I actually took off. I made real quick, took off in my motorhome the next day and drove to Kentucky, pulled my four-wheel drive behind me because it was wintertime. And I talked to Dad on the phone on the ride up there, drive up there, told Dad, you know, maybe, you know, get out of the hospital, get in hospice, you get home, I'll take you for a ride in this thing. Because he had, you know, he'd never seen my motorhome or anything. And towards the end of Dad's life, I think Dad was starting to doubt the Jehovah's Witnesses, and me and him talked a whole lot more. And even since he passed and Mom passed and I went through their house, I even believe that more because of some of the reading material I found. So anyway, getting back to my dad, I drove up there. I talked to my dad on the phone, and he was in the hospital, and he didn't sound terrible. You know, he didn't sound terrible at all. I ended up picking up my son, my oldest son, in Tennessee, where he was living at the time. He was born in '97, so he was about, I guess, I don't know how old he was at that time, but he was you know, in his 20s, early 20s, I guess, or late teens. And pick him up. We get to Kentucky, and I go and I park in my sister's house in her driveway. with my RV. And I got there about 9:30 at night. And the plans were, when I got there, my sister and I were going to go to the hospital. And they were taking turns, spending the night in the hospital with my dad. And my sister was going to spend the night with dad that night. And I was a fly. So I get there, and about 9:30, and mom is already at my sister's house with some family. And I set up, I'm getting the motorhome all set up, and I'm pretty exhausted. I just driven, because I had to pick up my son, I had to take a different route, and it took me like 14 hours to get there, and I just drove straight. And mom, we were getting ready to go to the hospital, and mom looked at me and said, "Tim, you just got off the road. You look exhausted. Why don't you just get some sleep and come and see your dad in the morning?" I was like, "Okay." Yeah. I was like, "That does." Yeah. Okay. This is tough. 2 o'clock in the morning. My sister's knocking on my RV window, and dad had died that night. I didn't get to see him. In the moment it happened, in the moment my sister told me, I took the information in, and I just remember saying, I remember saying to her, and it sounded harsh, but I said, I can't deal with that right now. I just talk to me in the morning. And I ended up staying there like 11 days. And it was the witnesses didn't treat me very, very well at all during that whole process. And it was just traumatic, because my dad was a really good man, and it's at his heart. Both of my parents were, even though my mom had her problems and was abusive, they were both good people. They were just brainwashed with this ideology. I don't blame them at all for any of this. I blame the cult, but while I was there, I still had my son with me. I had to take him back home. I had to get back to North Carolina, because at this time, I still had my business license and the company going, and guys were working. So I just had to put my dad in the back of my head, and I just closed it off. And I don't think I cried or anything until after I got back to North Carolina, and after I had got to my buddy's house, and I'd parked in my buddy's yard. This was before the pandemic, but that's where I ended up getting stuck during the pandemic. I stayed in his yard the entire time, but I never processed Dad's passing. And also, my spiritual beliefs, I didn't really talk about them a whole lot, but they're very esoteric in their beliefs. And also, I'm bringing back the Grateful Dead thing. While I was, which I didn't mention before, when I was into that environment and going to those shows, and I got introduced to psychedelics, mushrooms and that acid and that kind of thing. And that wasn't, and that was something I regularly did. But as I grew older, I started to look at psychedelics not as a drug that's recreational, and LSD, acid, not at all, but mushrooms started becoming therapeutic for me. And to take mushrooms and go on a little psychedelic journey helped me process a lot of things. And there was something very interesting that happened. I decided I had not dealt with my dad's death, and I needed to. And I told my buddy Jason what I was going to do. And I was in my RV. I said, I need you to leave me alone tonight. I'm gonna sit in my RV. I'm gonna eat some mushrooms, and I'm gonna process Dad's passing. And that's what I did. And it was the craziest thing happened. I can't remember what went on in my journey that night, but I know some healing took place. But what happened the next morning was amazing. And actually, it's on I have a YouTube channel that I've only posted one video on, and it's because of this. And it's like 5 years ago. I posted it 4 years ago. That night, I went really deep in this psychedelic journey, and thought deeply about my father. And finally, I got woke up. I fell asleep at some point, and I got woke up at a knock at the door, and it was 6:30 in the morning, and it was Jason, the friend I was staying at. He goes, "Dude, you are not going to believe what my Ring doorbell caught on camera." I'm like, "Huh?" I said, "You have to wake me up now?" And I said, "I mean, you know what I did last night?" And he's like, "Yeah, dude." He goes, "I think it has something to do with that." His Ring doorbell camera was facing out in the yard, and you could see the side of my RV. And after I get off here, I will send you a link to that video so you can look at it. All of a sudden, when the video starts, it's motion, right? And what the video caught was, when it first starts, you see an orb of light above the door of my motorhome, and it floats down in front of my motorhome and expands into like an oval shape. It almost as it walked down my steps. It goes across the yard, bounces off the ground. You can see it interact with the ground. There's some cars parked in the yard, and the Ring there's a porch with a covering, and there's like a post, so you can see that it's in front of the cars, but you can see it's not like a bug in front of the camera, is what I'm getting at. And it floated to around the back side, out of sight, and I don't know how you believe and what your beliefs are today, after your experiences. But somehow I believe that's connected to my dad. And on that journey I had, it really, I can't explain it any other way. And when you look at the video, and maybe you can post the link to the video so other people can look at it and decide for themselves. But it was pretty crazy. But then the pandemic struck, and we'll move on from my dad for a minute, because that got kind of emotional. But then the pandemic struck, and I was forced into isolation, which being socially, I've always been socially awkward. Do you know what masking is? I think I might have, when we talked on the phone, I might have said something about it.
Yeah.
But, all my life, I've pretty much masked. I consider myself a chameleon. I would just be able to blend into the situation and talk the talk that they're talking, but it was never me. And it was always difficult and exhausting, but I had the energy when I was younger to do it. And, I did it. And then I got forced into isolation, and things just began to break down for me when I was alone. I had a I had a breakdown then where I attempted to reach out for help. But then and I was actually taking some therapy. I started getting therapy online, on Zoom from a local doctor there in Wilmington. And then the quarantine finally got lifted. And once the quarantine lifted, I don't know. The therapy, I didn't have easy internet access, living full time in a motorhome. So I discontinued that. And basically I lived off my money until, and traveled. And until, well, basically I damn near blew all my money in 4 years. So I haven't worked, but I have isolated myself consistently since then. I had a friend that would give me some work from time to time after my money, my account. This is going through $500,000 in like 4 years, which, it's easy. Somebody could do that quickly. It has a lot of money, but if that's your life savings, and you should do a little better. But I did have a guy that I knew, an acquaintance, who had a lot of properties, and he would give me some, even after I lost my electrical license, which to give me some work here and there. And he had a place I could go and park at out in the country. And so I continued to isolate. And then I had a 1979 CJ5 Jeep that I had bought and actually built from the ground up. I took the whole thing apart. It was a 2-year process. This was during the course of the 2 years right after Hurricane Florence. I bought this Jeep and totally restored it. I had never done that before in my life. I had help, but I learned how to weld in the process, and it looked like a brand new 1979 CJ5. Had a 4-inch lift on it and everything, and decided to sell it. And this is kind of funny. I was staying out in the country at that spot, and I decided to sell it. And the guy that bought it, we ended up connecting because he's just fellowship Jehovah's Witness. And he invited me to come park in his yard and stay, and which was in Wilmington, which is closer to everything. So I went and parked in Wilmington, and I was there. And then, gosh, I wasn't there more than, this was in 2022. I wasn't there for, God, maybe a couple of months. And I get a call from my sister, and Mom tells me Mom's diagnosed with cancer. And I'm like, oh, what? She goes, well, it says it's stage 4. She's going to have to start taking chemo and this and that. And I said, well, keep me posted. I said, let me know what's going on. And let me know when I need to make a trip. And it wasn't just a few days later. She said, you might want to start planning on coming up here. She's not doing well at all. And it was the same thing, just like my dad. Phone calls progressed. You need to get here as soon as you can. So here I did again. I packed everything up. I had limited funds at this point. I had I probably had to my name, after blowing through my money and not working, I probably had a couple $1,000. It cost me $600 in gas to get there in my motorhome. I took off and I got there, and she still lived in the same trailer park I grew up in. Isn't that crazy? Just in a different spot. I parked, the manager of the trailer park let me park my RV in an empty spot, which happened to be across the street from the trailer. I get there, Mom's in hospice in the trailer. And my mom's sisters were there, and my sister was there, and there was just a lot of arguing going on between my mom's sisters. They're Jehovah's Witness. My sister. I just walked into chaos, and I kind of just like, you guys, I brought it to her. I said, you guys need to stop. I said, Mom can hear everything you're saying. Mom was unconscious, but she was in and out of consciousness. The only words she actually said from the time I was there was, I need to pee. That's the only thing that came out of her mouth. And me and my sister changed her, because once my sister and I got there, her sisters demanded that we are the ones that need to take care of her now, because we've never been there for her. So, after I arrived, the sisters left. And no, during all we changed my mom. And a nurse had come by because my mom was really bloated, and she had come by to take out the catheter. And everybody had stepped outside for a second. And I noticed my mom taking some deep breaths. And I walked over to her, and I was just like, hey, Mom, I love you. I said, it's okay. You can go. And I swear to God, she took a deep breath in, let it out. And there was a long pause. She took another deep breath in, let it out, and she was gone. Nobody else was in the house but me. The nurse was outside talking to my sister and my mom's sisters. And I go outside, and I tell them, I said, I think she's gone. And they come in there and confirm that's what's happened. And after that, the sisters left. I'm just going to make the story shorter. We found out this afterwards, but they took a lot of my mom's stuff out of the house prior to us getting there, my sister and I, including $5,000 in cash. It was in a safe. Honestly, I don't know what all personal items that they took and got away with. But, in the process of the coroner coming to pick her up and word getting out to the Jehovah's Witnesses, people had started coming by. And an elder from the congregation that I remember that was still there, his name is Chris Harden. He approached me and talked to me in a very nice way. And then his wife asked me, "Were you still in? I forget how she worded it, but so she says, no, I just, and it was in a very nice way. It just, no, I'm sorry, I don't follow those beliefs anymore." And from that time out, all of the, how usually they bring food over and all that stuff, that stopped. I was left at my mother's house, and everything went to my aunt's house, and I was not offered a bit of food, invitation, not even invited to my mom's memorial. And that was shocking. I really didn't think I'd be treated that way in that situation. They just, it was the same. It was like I didn't exist. Once I told them, no, I'm not Jehovah's Witness. I had to end up staying there at my mom's house. Just this time, my sister lived in Florida, and she had to go back home. So my aunt was the executor of the estate, Well, she decided she didn't want to do that anymore because she wouldn't show us the will. My sister and I wanted to see the will. I mean, we need to see Mom's will, and she would refuse to let us see the will. Well, finally, she just decided she didn't want to be the executor of state anymore. And I had things work out in mysterious ways. I contacted a friend that I had when I was younger. I'd mentioned him earlier, Gary. I'd stayed at his house a lot when I was young. And his wife was a paralegal for the district attorney of the city. So she was able to give me a lot of guidance and support on how to handle the situation. And I had to take over being the executor of the estate. And I got that put into place and was finally able to retrieve all the items that was taken from Mom's house. When we read the will, which was shocking, I didn't expect this at all. But my mom and my mom, man, when Dad died, I got nothing. I got absolutely nothing. I just got to pick through some of his clothes and that kind of thing, some of his personal items, nothing else. But when Mom died, I was totally shocked. She split everything between my sister and I 50-50, and nobody else got anything. And she had squandered away in an account $120,000 plus $5,000 cash that was in the house. So I was blown away by that. I thought, so I ended up staying. I had to stay in Kentucky for 5 months in my parents' house, which that was a traumatic experience in itself. I thought it would help me process a lot of things, and in a way it kind of did. But it wasn't till after I sold her trailer and came home, and my sister and we ended up splitting up the money, and I got a little over $60,000, which isn't a ton of money, but when I was damn near broke at the time, it helped out tremendously. And I come back and I bought a piece of property. I got an acre of property out in it's White Lake, North Carolina, but it's actually Elizabethtown. It's a little small community that sits around a lake, and I'm at the end of a dead end road. I found this place here with I got it for $30,000 with a 2014 model pull behind RV on it that has 2 slides. And it was way bigger than my motorhome. So I was living in my motorhome. The RV did need to be remodeled a little bit. That came with the property, but like I said, I got it all for 30 grand. So that was half of my money there, and I bought a minivan and bought a few guitars. I just, spent impulsively. And, there's another added part to this story that we can add on to later if you want to continue, but I can wrap this part up and get to what's happened recently, but I'll leave a little part out in the middle since I bought the property. Because I actually ended up reuniting with a ex-Jehovah's Witness friend that was a girl, and we ended up having a relationship, and she come and stayed here with me for a little while, but we'll keep that out of the story for a minute because she ended up going home. It didn't work out, and it didn't work out because of me. It was not her. It was once I got out here and the reality of my parents passing and the reality of never having know what a family was, never having support, it all started to sink in how much that have affected my life. And, being bombarded with thoughts of what if I had been encouraged? What if I'd been pushed to do something? I've accomplished all these things in my life and done some amazing things in my life and just flying by the seat of my pants. What could I have been? What could I have done? If I just had some encouragement and support in my life. And those thoughts just tore me apart. And I got to the point where I don't want to say I was ready to end my life, because I don't believe in that. And my spiritual, the way I believe spiritually, I guess that wouldn't be an option for me. But I did feel like that all I was doing is sitting here, rotting away, waiting to die, waiting for my time. And the isolation became more and more. The anxiety became more intense and more intense. I got to where I didn't even want to leave the house. I would only leave if I had to get something, had to go to the store, ran out of something. And finally, there was one day I just broke down, and there's a crisis line that you can call. And I called that crisis line. And that was a little over a year ago. And that's got me on the path of what's going on. And I ended up getting full Medicaid, which is great here in North Carolina. I don't know how it is in your state, but full Medicaid is, you don't pay for nothing and you got everything. I can get, eye surgery, whatever it is, I can get. So that was a blessing. And it's been a slow process, but in the process, part of that is doing things like this, is tremendously helpful for me. But I got a full psychological evaluation that's, and it's still ongoing. But I got diagnosed with several disorders, and they all I gotta look at my paper. They all boil down to, so the way I understand it is, all of these disorders I didn't always have. I always had autism. I've always had ADHD. CT, it's such a tongue twister. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is apparently have always had that. But because it's gone untreated, and literally for the years of self-isolation and lack of support systems, other disorders developed. So I got diagnosed with, I got CPTSD, I'm on the autistic spectrum, major depressive disorder, of course, ADHD, social anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and agoraphobia. And, I have always heard of agoraphobia, and I couldn't understand that. And you don't get an understanding of it until you have it. And, still to this day, this is something I'm working on. And, this is a big step for me in that direction. I've got a blog I'm starting, and I've told you quite a bit about that. And hopefully, I write code. I'm self-taught on a lot of things. I can do a lot of different things. I like to write. I play music, write poetry. I designed my blog. But I'm hoping to be able to create some kind of online communities where I can start, having some support in my life and real friends in my life, especially that have had similar experiences. But even, where I'm at today is dealing with these conditions, and the agoraphobia is overwhelming. I mean, I rarely go outside the house. I mean, I go outside to take my dog out, and that's about it. I will really, right now I've got one of my meds that is sitting at the pharmacy, and I haven't had it for 2 days, and I haven't gone and got it because of agoraphobia. And I have to go get it today. It's just one of those things that I have to do once I get there, but it's very uncomfortable. When I walk into a place, I feel like there's a big arrow on top of my head, and everybody, it's pointing me out. This you know, I want to say, I want to use language, but, you know, this messed up guy, and it's just a big neon sign pointing to me. And I feel like as soon as I leave the place, everybody's talking about me, and it's just it's a terrible feeling. And honestly, it feels good to be able to just say it and just let other people hear it, because hopefully somebody else will watch it and hear what this religion, this cult, took away from me. It took away my parent. It took away my family. It took away everything I could have been. And you know, and if I had not had the courage to reach out for some help, I don't know if I would be here today. And I know I say that's not an option, but I wouldn't have taken my life. I think I may have had a heart attack. I've already had one. And it was stress induced, anxiety reduced. I had that just within the last year I had it. But you know, that's where I'm at today, and I'm feeling good with my progress, and I'm feeling good with my growth. I'm okay with it. I mean, I've come to a point of accepting it, and what makes me know that is I reached out to you for one. You know, that's something at the height of my symptoms, I would have never done. And I'm really happy that I was able to do that and do this with you.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. You had a lot of twists and turns in your story, but you can see where it all stems from. And I'm just glad that you are where you are today, you know?
Well, I'm glad where I am today. I look forward to the tomorrows.
Yes.
You know, I look forward to being able to walk my dog without being afraid, you know. You know, but I know that's going to happen now. It really empowers me to write on this blog, even though it's not public yet. I've written, you know, several articles so far, and my passions, I lost all my passions. I wasn't, you know, at the height of my symptoms, I wasn't doing anything. I would just sit on the couch and go through YouTube all day long. I'd spend more time looking for something to watch than actually watching something. And that would be day in, day out, day in, day out. You know, nothing grabbed my attention. And with ADHD and autism, you have hyperfocus, and I had none. And now I am just so engaged in writing and this feeling creative, and that's a good feeling to have again.
Yes, yes, yes. I can tell. Yeah. So I got a couple more questions for you before we finish up here.
Sure.
So the first one, just as you talked about still having that mentality, you know, still under the, you know, the mental constraints of being a witness. So when you were going through all these things, getting into the drugs, the gangs, you know, moving around, going to, how did did you feel guilty? Did you feel like was that mindset still with you at that point, or?
You know what, I would have to say early on it did. You know, I felt like, yeah, I was you know, condemned to you know, an Armageddon. I was going to die, and that was just it. You know, I did believe that. That took a while to erase that. That's gone now. Diving into spirituality and not religion really has changed my perspective on a lot of things. You know, I still don't believe in hell, as Christians talk about it. You know, I believe there's a type of place that could be like that if you believe in that type of place. But I think everything's a self-created journey, and I believe you know, what your truth is your truth, and that's what's true to you, and that's what you'll experience. And for the longest time, my truth has been that I'm not a good person and people don't like me, and I'm a weirdo and all this other stuff. And you know, it's taken a lot to even get to this point, even though I'm you know, at the beginning of healing at 51.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's an accomplishment in itself, just to get to that point where you're not feeling those negative thoughts about yourself.
Well,
Wow.
I still feel negative thoughts about myself, but they're not related to the Jehovah's Witnesses directly. It's more related to the rejection and it's the negative self-talk that's, you know, that's like that. You know, it's like I deal with the feeling like I'm repulsive to people. I get those kind of thoughts and things, and it comes from the rejection, the shunning, and it's a direct result of it. I mean, and that is from having it at 10 years old. That is everything, even to today. You know, outside of somebody who can understand me like you, I put on a mask when I'm talking to other people. I'm not me, and you know, that's the part that I want to be able to take off that mask.
Yeah, should be your authentic self.
Yeah, and this is the first time I've ever done it. Now everybody's gonna see it, and it makes me emotional.
Yeah, well, hey, you know, it's good because people get to see how awesome you actually are. You know, you done so much stuff, you know, and your just your brain power. I mean, just seeing your blog, you know, it's not out there for the public yet, but when it is, people are really going to see it.
Oh yeah, you did see. I shared it with the.
Yeah. So you know, that's just awesome that you're able to blossom out like that, and that's just the beginning. You know, I mean, who knows where you're going to be in 10 years from now? You know.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I got one last question for you, just to end things. So what advice would you have for people that are, especially younger people, who are waking up, who are getting out of the Jehovah's Witnesses today, trying to, you know, get into their authentic life like you are? What advice would you have for them?
My advice for them would be to try to connect with people like you. Try to find that ex-Jehovah's Witness community because they understand, and you know, there's nobody else you're going to be able to talk to that does. You know, I've had that issue with therapists. You know, there's therapists don't grasp it because most of them know nothing about Jehovah's Witnesses. So you know, like the therapist that I'm dealing with now is actually she's educating herself on it. And I'm trying to educate her on it because they have no idea. They have no idea the mental constraints that have been put on your inner being, and how you look at yourself and how you look at the world, and the fact if you're still holding on to those beliefs and having doubts and fear. You know, it's I can't imagine being in the JWs today. I know it's changed considerably a lot since I've been there, and I've been I don't know if you've kept up with what's been going on over in Norway, where they got their nonprofit and religious status taken away from them. Then they sued Norway, and just in the last few days, it's come out that Norway denied reinstating their religious status. So
yes,
it's coming out. You know, they try to reword it. Oh, we don't disfellowship anymore. They just have to leave the organization.
Remove. Yeah,
yeah. That's what it's semantics. You know, it's you know, change the verbiage. That's all they did. But you know, there's an awareness of it, and I would highly suggest to look and research. Do your research, and once you start researching the truth, you'll discover that's exactly what it's not.
Absolutely. And along with that research, hearing stories like your own, as much as the witnesses try to paint themselves to be this perfect organization that's doing, that's a cut above the rest of the world, stories like yours, the rest of the people that I've done interviews with, the many, many other people out there that have told their stories, you can see from real people that have been in there, they're doing all kind of damage, all kind of trauma on people, and it has a lasting effect. So
yeah, I feel for the people that, I hear these new terms, the PMOs, and that wasn't a thing back then. When I was going through this, we didn't have cell phones or internet or anything, so there wasn't any mass communications. I feel for those people that are physically in and mentally out, because that has to be a terrible place to be. I couldn't imagine that. I just couldn't imagine living. I'd feel kind of like I feel now, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I was there for about a year myself, and it's very tough, and it's very isolating. And I'd say the only good thing about it is that you understand what's going on, so you're able to release some of that guilt. You're able to release some of that fear of man. Um, and you're able to walk into that Kingdom Hall, every meeting, and just you know what's what. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a better feeling. But other than that, though, it's a tough experience. I definitely feel for them too.
Yeah, I do, and I wish I have a feel. I feel like the organization itself is on its way down. You got one country now, and of course they're going to use that as prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to use that as arm. It's crazy. When I didn't know they were doing this, but I was going through Mom's house, after she passed away, and I had to clean it out and all that. She had a little, like a survival kit, Armageddon survival kit stashed away with all the survival gear and all this like food, and I was like, really?
Oh yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah,
I knew they didn't do that when I was back then. I was.
Because it makes it more real to them, they got to keep it real for them.
It's crazy. She had toiletries and underwear, and it was something else.
It is. So I really hope you guys enjoyed that interview. Thank you so much to Tim for coming on, being vulnerable, being authentic, being willing to share your story. Again, a much different story than anything like I've heard before. But it's just interesting how everything aligns and how you can see how everything that you went through stemmed from that event of being shunned at only 10 years old. So you're a very strong person for getting through all that. And I know you have great things planned for this new year since your birthday is coming up. So happy birthday to you. And hopefully this is a fantastic year for you. Can't wait to see what you do. But for all you watching, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Stay tuned, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.